Hi. Anybody who knows me knows this is not where I want to be standing right now. This is not my comfort zone. Oh, I I have written and rewritten this 4 times. My story spans about 6 years, and there's a lot that happened in 6 years. So, I won't be able to tell you everything, and I hope we won't be here till breakfast. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how long this is gonna take. But I thought I would just start by giving you the the brief version, and then I'll go into what God really did during that time. So 2 days before 2018, my husband confessed to me that he didn't love me. He said he never loved me and that he was going to leave me and he wasn't sure he wanted a family. We have 2 boys. We were separated from we were separated in our home, and then we were separated with him living away uh, until 2023. And then in 2023, he served me divorce papers, and we were divorced for a short time. It didn't take long for God to get a hold of him. And by that fall, he was coming home. And then we were remarried September 28th, 2024. So, yeah, praise God. I thought I'd start maybe with just how we met and a little bit of our background, my faith background. Andrew and I met at St. Scholastica. I was a junior transfer student and he was a freshman. That wasn't very cool, but I didn't really have any say in that because he was literally a man opening a door for me. And I didn't know who he was. He opened the door, and I had this feeling wash over me of peace and safety, like I'd walked through my front door of my house. And I knew in that moment that whoever that stranger was, I was going to marry him. We were married November 29th, 1997, in a candlelight service with 250 guests. My dad did the service. He's a pastor. So I grew up a pastor's kid. I grew up sitting in the second row with my dad at the pulpit, my mom in the choir, and the entire congregation watching me from behind. So I still, to this day, feel like the entire congregation is watching me from behind. The night that we got married, it was, of course, one of the happiest days of my life. But I remember as we were walking out of the church, I had this moment of fear. And I stopped and I thought, no, I don't have to be scared. God, you entered this covenant with Andrew and me. I don't know how I knew that. I still don't know how I knew that because I really was kind of immature in my faith. But I knew somehow that God was in it. And no matter what we faced, we were going to be okay. Marriage was not easy. I had a chronic health condition that wasn't diagnosed till I was 30. And it robbed us of a lot for many, many years. I didn't have a lot of energy. I was sick constantly. I was on different medications. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. During that time, we had 2 boys. Andrew had his struggles too that he brought into the marriage. He struggled with self-worth and self-identity, and he sought his identity in his job. So he was at work far, far more than he was ever home. I was raising the boys alone. We struggled with communication, which I don't think is very unusual with men and women. I didn't understand how he received my messages, and he didn't understand how I received his, and there were a lot of issues that we just couldn't figure out. Somewhere along the line, though, he started to pull away. And at the time, I didn't know what it was, and I assumed it was something I was doing wrong. I think that's pretty common for a lot of women just to think, well, I need to, make sure dinner's on the table on time and make sure that he's, attracted to me. And I tried things, one thing after another, but he was pulling away and pulling away and pulling away. He was struggling with honesty. He was hiding things from me, and I was finding out accidentally or because some well-meaning person decided to, let me know the rumors that were going on. So there were some painful moments throughout the years where I had to confront him on things that he was doing. And at the same time, he was pulling away and pulling away. And it was so gradual that I don't think I even knew at first it was happening until it was so bad that my I could feel like it felt like he had left our marriage completely. Like I felt the void, if that makes any sense. And I didn't know how to get back. I didn't know how to get him back. I didn't know what to do. I tried everything. I tried talking to him. I tried getting mad at him. I tried nagging him for not being around. I I begged. I cried. I did every ugly thing you can think of, and probably everything that we naturally as humans would try, and nothing worked. 2 days before 2018, I think I had hit my wall. This had come after I had gone to a number of pastors and talked to them. I have a lot of pastors in my life. My dad's a pastor, my brother's a pastor. I've worked for several pastors. So I actually talked to 6 different pastors, told them all what was going on, and they all advised that I leave him, take the boys, leave him for my own sake and for the boys' sake. And it just didn't feel right. That didn't feel right. 2 days before 2018, I had hit my wall, and I remember begging him that we take some time to talk. And we got in his car and we drove to a parking lot so that we weren't at home with the kids. And I don't know what was different about that day, but that day he finally broke down and he said, I don't think I love you. I don't think I ever loved you. I think this was a mistake. And I don't think I want a family. He didn't know what he was going to do. He just knew that he was trying to figure out a way out. He didn't have a plan yet. So we went back home. I was in shock. There really are no words for what I was feeling in that moment. But I remember when I got home, I called my dad, which in hindsight was not the right thing to do, but he was my spiritual guide. And I felt like I needed somebody level-headed with faith to give me a little perspective. And that wasn't fair on him. This is his only daughter. He said, why don't you pack up the boys, bring them to us, get out of the house, spend New Year's with us. So I did. I don't remember packing. I don't remember driving, but I do remember being there. I remember that when I got there, my parents kind of took over with Isaac and Sam, and I went to bed. I was getting over a case of walking pneumonia. I was on medication. I was emotional. I was exhausted. And so I went to bed and I prayed. And I prayed and I prayed for the better part of 3 days. And my prayer was just a constant, God, what do you want me to do? This is my family. My family has broken. This is the man you chose for me. And I don't know what to do. I've tried everything in my own strength. What am I supposed to do? On the third day of praying, it was the day we were coming home, God gave me a vision. I call it a vision. And if anybody has a better word for it, I would gladly hear it. It was like I was Andrew and I could feel everything that he was feeling. And it was intense and it was overwhelming. I could feel the shame. I could feel the pain. I could feel the anger and the hurt. And it was consuming. It was more than I could handle. And I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know what was causing it, but it was intense. And as I came out of that moment, God washed me with this compassion, this feeling of compassion. It started at my head and it went all the way through me. And as it went through my heart, it took my hard, bitter, angry heart of stone and it broke it. And it literally turned into a heart of flesh. Because I was angry. I was hurt. And I had been holding on to hurt and anger for a long time. Things had built up over the years. There had been rumors of all kinds of things that he had been doing, and I didn't know anymore what to believe because he was so secretive. But in that moment, God broke my heart open, and he took all that anger, and he took all that hurt and that bitterness, and it was gone. It wasn't a place I could have gotten to on my own. I needed a supernatural experience to get there. God was the only one who could do it for me. I remember thinking, well, now I know what's wrong with him. So I can help him. I can go home and I can tell him I've had this experience and now I can help you through it. And so I did. And that did not go very well. In fact, I think it made it a whole lot worse. No, I remember the look on his face. Like he was shocked and I think appalled that I would even suggest that I understood what he was going through or that I in any way was going to have anything to do with him getting better. So he was living at home still. And at this point, we had two scenarios going on. Either he ignored me and our sons completely, or he was angry. I never knew which one was coming through the door. I never knew when he was coming through the door. He could be gone for days. He could be gone for a few hours. I didn't know when I was going to see him. So I lived in fear of him coming home because most of the time he'd come home angry. So there was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse at that time. I felt like I'd had this answer from God with this vision. When he took my heart and healed me of that bitterness, I felt like that meant, well, okay, now I can work on this. What I should have done was wait for the rest of the answer. I should have continued to pray and said, well, okay, Lord, Clearly, you don't want me to take any legal action. Clearly, you don't want me to do anything against my husband. What do you want me to do? But instead, I did what my nature is, which is to take control and try and figure it out myself. So I Googled a lot, many, many nights of Googling because I wasn't sleeping. And what I found, and I'm not endorsing this author at all, she's not a Christian author, but I found a book by a woman named Laura Doyle called The Empowered Wife. And it wasn't a bad book. It had some good ideas in it. It had some ideas for how to treat your spouse with respect, your husband with respect. It talked about some common sense things I'd never thought about, how some of the ways we talk to our husbands, they receive it really disrespectfully. It really wounds them. And I felt very convicted in that. And I thought, well, this is something I can change. This is something concrete. It talked about how we shouldn't expect our spouses to make us happy, which is very important. Talked about how to handle that, how to take care of that on your own and not expect it from them. It actually had 6 separate steps that you're supposed to follow, and then magically your husband would be attracted to you and everything would be okay. So I started putting it into practice. What I didn't know then, and I know now, is a door had opened in our marriage and in Andrew's heart. And I believe he had a demon working in him at that time. And that demon did not like it that I was no longer standing up for myself when Andrew would say things that were hurtful. And so he got angrier and angrier. I was determined to stick this out. Because in the meantime, I had found a Facebook group that was all about this author and all about this book. And she had rules in this Facebook group. And as long as we followed those, we could be part of the community and we could learn from each other. There were like 16,000 women in it. It was amazing from all over the world. I was in it for probably a few months and I was starting to get a little frustrated. Things weren't getting any better. And in the group, you weren't allowed to talk about your faith, and that didn't work for me. It felt like something was missing. And one day I got a message from one of the women in the group that I had gotten to know. There were like 20 women who all had this really strong faith, and they felt like they weren't really getting what they needed out of that group. So they created their own group and they invited me to join. I am still friends with several of them. I just love the way God redirects us when we get off track, because he didn't say, okay, Kristina, you aren't paying attention to what you're supposed to be paying attention to. He didn't rebuke me. There was no guilt, shame, or condemnation. Instead, he just gently guided me back to the point that he was trying to teach me. So one day I logged on my computer and there was one of the women had uploaded a video from the BTG movement, which is the Better Together movement. It was started by a couple called Shayla and Armando Ramos. She had stood for the healing of their marriage for 3 years, for the restoration of their marriage, while he was off living his life on drugs and infidelity. It was a powerful video. I had never in my life heard the term marriage restoration. I didn't even know God did that. And I knew that I knew that I knew in that moment, that's what you're trying to tell me, God. You want to restore my marriage. He never verbally told me, I'm going to restore your marriage. But I knew he was telling me that. And I can't even explain why. I just knew it in my spirit. I knew he was making me a promise. And that was probably the true moment that I became a stander. So this was March of 2019. I was new to this and I was exhausted. I had gone through a lot of trauma with all of the verbal and emotional abuse. I didn't have much of a self-esteem at that time. And I was working at a new job. I'm a preschool teacher, so I work with little children. I had not told the staff that I was going through any of this because I was worried they would show me the door if they knew how crazy my life was. There are a couple of them sitting here tonight. So I kept it to myself. I'd get to work, and as long as I was at work with these children, I didn't think about my life. I didn't think about what was happening at home. But as soon as I left the building, my reality would just flood back in. And by the time I got to my car, I'd be in full-on panic attack. I'm assuming it was a panic attack. I don't know. I've never seen anybody have one. But all I know is I'd be sitting in my car, panicking, crying, shaking, and I'd have no idea where I was. I'd be staring at the building across the street, which is where I worked, and I'd have no idea what that building was. I didn't know my car. I didn't know where in the world I was. I didn't know how I was supposed to get home. And this would go on for I don't know how long. And it was every day that I worked. And it would take a while for it to come, to start to go away. And I'd be like, oh, this is my car. And then I'd recognize the building. And pretty soon I'm like, okay, I'm in Duluth. I have to drive to Cloquet. And then, of course, I'd be crying all the way home. And this went on for weeks. And I just kept praying that nobody would notice me having a panic attack in the parking lot. One day after one of these episodes, I was driving home. And you know that section on I-35 where you kind of come around the bend and Midway Road, the exit's right there. And it's like the sky gets so huge. I had been praying to God as I was driving. God, I feel so alone. I feel so alone. And I came around the bend to that area. And all of a sudden, it was just filled with angels. Massive. I mean, just enormous angels. And I looked down at my hands and somebody was holding them. I don't know who was driving. Wasn't me. I don't remember the road or the other cars. But I knew I wasn't alone. And that's when the panic attacks stopped. I began discovering God's heart for my marriage during this time. I was just eating up anything that the Better Together movement put out. I was watching sermons. I was listening to anybody online that I could find that had any kind of message of hope. Because I didn't know until this happened. I didn't know how big God was. I didn't know how much He loved me. I have always had faith. I was I was born in Germany, in Frankfurt. My dad was a young life leader, and my mom was always by his side. And I was a young life baby pushing balls around on the pool table in the youth hostel and hanging out with the teenagers and listening to the music and the stories. And I remember the stories my dad would tell about our Heavenly Father, our Heavenly Daddy. I grew up knowing that he was just the most loving dad, that I could go to him anytime. There was nothing I could ever do that would make him not love me. And at 4 years old, I decided I wanted to be baptized. And I remember my baptism. So I've been talking to God my whole life, but something shifted when we moved to the United States and my dad went to seminary. He went to Princeton University's theological seminary and he came out a Presbyterian pastor, and we moved to Litchfield, Minnesota, and he pastored his first church there. And wonderful little church. All of his churches have been wonderful, loving people, awesome potlucks. I didn't know what a potluck was till I was 8 years old, but it was different. God was kind of in a box. We kept him smaller. There were rules and there was liturgy and beautiful hymns, but we somehow didn't just let him do what he was going to do anymore. And so during this time of standing, I started really learning how much he loved me, how big he is, and what he's capable of. Scripture started speaking to me, and I was journaling everything I was learning. Jeremiah 33, 2 through 3 was one of my verses. This is what the Lord says: He who made the earth, the Lord who formed it and established it, the Lord is his name. Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. God taught me to be still. He taught me that rushing my journey would only keep me stuck. God was giving me an opportunity to draw me back to him, to heal me, to teach me, and to restore me first before he brought me back to brought my husband back to our marriage. He wasn't going to give me back my husband with me still broken. He taught me to stop looking with my human eyes at what was happening and focus on what he said about my situation. Psalm 27, 13 through 14. I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Job 5, 8 through 9. But if it were I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. I could go on and on. I have 2 full journals. My Bible has more underlined than it doesn't. I started learning about the secret place. I didn't know there was a secret place. I didn't know there was a place I could go and be with God and just be safe, and I could go there anytime I wanted. Psalm 23, which I think is one of those that if we grow up in a church, you know it by heart to the point where maybe we don't even think about the words anymore. That one took on new meaning. Psalm 91, 1 through 2. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I love that one. I remember there was a day when Shayla was on a live feed, and she was talking about your prayer closet. And everybody on the feed, they all seemed to know what a prayer closet was. I did not. And they all called it their prayer closet. They all seemed to have a space where they could post things and they could go to be alone with God. And so I thought it had to be a closet. I spent a lot of time trying to make one of my tiny little closets in my 1950s house work. It did not work. So my bathroom became my prayer closet because that was my bathroom. My boys had their own bathroom. And I would spend hours in there with me, God, and my dog in my lap, licking away the tears. Andrew wasn't my partner, of course, at this time. He was lost and living outside God's protection and will. So God taught me to look at him as my husband and rely on him for everything. Isaiah 54:5. For your Maker is your husband, the Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. And I did. I talked to him like he was my husband. If the dishwasher broke, I talked to him about it and he helped me fix it. I was starting to at least understand a little bit how big God is and that he's the God of the impossible and that he knows the desires of my heart. And I just needed to trust him with this promise that he had spoken into my heart. Proverbs 16:9 says, in your heart you can make plans for your future, but the Lord chooses the steps you take to get there. God alone held the masterpiece of this story in his hands, and I had no idea how it would unfold. Now, honestly, if he had told me that in the end of 2017 that it would be the end of 2023 before Andrew would come back, I don't think I would have said yes. I think I would have walked away. So I'm really thankful God didn't tell me. I'm glad he just took me through it one day at a time. Things really looked impossible. Andrew's anger was scary. He threatened divorce papers all the time. So I started to learn how to declare God's truth over my life to combat the enemy's lies that would get into my head. I started learning the difference between truth and facts. The facts were what I could see. The facts were what Andrew was doing. The facts were anything tangible. But God's truth was that it didn't matter what the facts said. God would make a way where there didn't seem to be one. Shayla was a really big source of light for me at this time. She taught me to combat the lies of the enemy with joy, with singing, with laughter. She really drove home the point that we needed to enjoy life in the midst of the morning because nothing is impossible for God. So I would try to outdream God on my way to work. I would try to imagine 6 impossible things each day as I was driving, things that I really had, desires I had in my life, but couldn't imagine have them ever happen. Like, I don't know, like taking wonderful vacations and literally anything seemed impossible at this point. So I would imagine Andrew and I leading a Bible study in our house. And then I would think about how no matter what I dreamt of, this didn't come close to the plans that God had for me. I couldn't outdream him. I learned that while was fighting my battle, all I needed to do was to praise and worship, pray, and stay still in His presence. Sometimes I got impatient. I got tired. And I had to learn to take every thought captive in my mind and make it obedient to Jesus' will. So I was busy doing all this while Andrew was busy planning his escape. January of 2020, Andrew informed me he was moving away, 2.5 hours away. He had quit his job and had gotten a new job. I never got to know that he was planning anything until it happened, so everything was always a shock. He informed me that he was not going to sign me up for his health insurance. I was on my own, and if I thought he was going to pay my car payments anymore, I was crazy. So he moves away. I have no health insurance. I'm not sure if there's going to be money in the account when I go to the grocery store. I lived in fear of my card being declined. He disappears. I don't even know where he's living. I don't know the name of the place he's working. And then COVID happens, and I got really sick. And I remember my mom would call me every day to see how I was doing, and she was scared. So she would yell at me on the phone, which wasn't great because I was really sick. But that was how her fear came out. And she would yell at me that I had to do something. I had to take some action to get some health insurance so I could go to the doctor. I mean, this was a scary time if you remember when COVID started. I remember one day my oxygen level was not good and my lips were turning blue, and I called the hospital to talk to somebody, and whoever I talked to said, stay at home as long as you can because people are not coming out of here alive. And I got off the phone and I thought, this is not how it's going to end. Nope. I'm going to be okay. God has never not taken care of me. So I texted my good friend Tina and I said, I am out of toilet paper. And I gave her a list of things, and she went to the grocery store and left it on the front steps for me. And the next day I started feeling better. 6 weeks later, with no communication from Andrew, he walks in the door unannounced, as though it's the most normal thing in the world, and puts health insurance cards on the table. It starts telling me about our new health insurance plan. It was weird. He wasn't quite as angry as he had been. He seemed a little calmer. I didn't know he was coming. I had no warning at all, but now I had health insurance. I had been discovering some other wonderful ministries at this time. I had a lot of time at home. We weren't working. So I had been online a lot, and I found a ministry that deals totally just with marriages and the healing of marriages called Rejoice Marriage Ministries. Bob and Charlene Steinkamp started this many years ago. Bob has passed away since then, but Charlene and her daughters still continue to put out material. So I signed up for the daily devotions, and then I discovered the podcasts. I have probably listened to 100 testimonies of restored marriages. Every time I started feeling a little down, I would turn another one on. So I'm busy growing in the Lord and taking care of my kids and just taking one day at a time and keeping up my hope And Andrew starts visiting occasionally. And he's not as angry as he used to be, but he's still determined to divorce me. Every time he would leave, when he got ready to leave, he would always say, I'm still working on those divorce papers. But by this point, I was committed to what God had shown me and what he had taught me. And I was healed enough to be able to just love Andrew in those moments. So I would cook him his favorite dinner, or I would sit and listen to him talk about work, whatever he needed in that moment. And as he would leave, my heart was always breaking. But I would always tell him, I know you will be back someday. And I just want you to know that door is never closing. This will always be your home. He always looked at me like I was nuts. And then he would leave, and feel like I would feel like eating a pint of ice cream and crawling under a blanket and watching Gilmore Girls for the rest of the night with tissues. But I learned to encourage myself. So I would have dance parties in my kitchen with my dog. I found a lot of really good songs. To this day, if I turn on Colton Dixon's Build a Boat, my dog Lily will jump up and she's ready to dance. We Are Messengers 1,000 Times is a good one too. Need to Breathe. They've got several. Testify is one of my favorites. I had a lot of really awful moments. They would come out of the blue. For example, one day I went to get the mail and there was a postcard in there congratulating me on the 1-year anniversary of my new home. Andrew had bought a house a year before. I didn't even know you could buy a house without your spouse's knowledge, but you can. I remember having to pray really hard about that one. And then I tore the postcard up and I just threw it away. I said, okay, Lord, you knew he bought the house. I'm going to trust you to take care of this one too. 2022 came around. Andrew started acting like himself again. It was really weird because for the longest time, he didn't even look like himself. It was like his facial features had changed, but he started to look like himself. There was something in his eyes that was much more human. And he was even starting to have memories of our life together again. For the longest time, he could remember nothing about raising our kids, nothing about anything we'd ever enjoyed together. But now he was starting to have memories. Seemed like we were becoming friends. He would visit, we would go out together, we'd have long talks. And it was, well, obviously it was what I wanted. And so I made the mistake of paying attention to that and taking my eyes off God. I started to focus on what I was seeing with my eyes. I thought he was getting ready to return. That was the summer that we moved our youngest son into his dorm for his first year of college. We were out in the parking lot after we'd moved Sam in, and Andrew confessed to me that he had purchased a home and that he knew now that it wasn't right and that he had a buyer and that I legally had to be present at the signing. So I did it. So now I'm focusing more on us and less on God. October came and Andrew had a trip to London for work. And he had called me the night before and we had chatted. And then he called me from the airport and we had chatted. And I said, okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks. He was going to be home the week before Halloween. He was going to come and help me get the house ready for winter. The week that he came back, I didn't hear from him. And I thought, well, he's jet lagged. And then that Thursday, which is my Friday at work, that's always our Friday, he started texting me and I started texting him. And it was just little things like there'd be a text from him, and then a couple hours later, I'd respond, and it was casual, but we were planning the weekend. Early evening, I responded, and then I never heard from him again. I didn't think anything of it at the time. This one's going to be hard. I don't know why, but I forgot to turn the sound off of my phone that night. I usually do on Fridays because I could sleep in. I woke up to a phone call. It was my father-in-law. He hadn't talked to me since 2018 started. My in-laws had shut me out. But there he was on the phone, and he was telling me that Andrew had been in a motorcycle accident. He'd been airlifted to Hennepin County Medical Center in downtown Minneapolis, and he was in serious condition in the surgical trauma unit. I think I must have gone into some kind of shock. I don't know why, but my oldest son, who happened to be home that morning, he heard the phone or something and he came upstairs. It was very out of character, came to check on me. And I told him what had happened and he sprang into action. He's wonderful that way. He told me, okay, we're going to get a hotel room. We're going to pack up. We're going to figure out what to do with the dog and we're going. In the meantime, I am sitting there in bed thinking I need to find pants. Like, I didn't know what to do. I think he helped me. I know he helped me pack. I know he got me breakfast. He made me coffee. He got me in the car. I was just a mess. And we drove there. We got there and they wouldn't let us even know which room it was that they had Andrew in because his brother, who's a whole nother story, had told them that we were separated and that Andrew wouldn't want me there. So they wouldn't tell me where he was. But his nurse, I don't know what it was that compelled her to do this. She was nearby and she said, "No, that's not right. They're married. We don't have a right to decide if they're getting along or not. She can know which room he's in. She legally has a right to know." And they gave me the room number and we walked in. He was not recognizable. The whole side of his face was mangled. His eye was swollen shut. This was just the parts I could see of him. His hand was, it looked like they hadn't even washed the blood off of him yet. His hand was totally mangled and swollen. He was hooked to all kinds of things. My in-laws were in the room. Nobody said hi. I remember I went and sat next to him. And I took his other hand, the one that wasn't all banged up. I was holding it and he opened his eyes and he looked confused. And then he said, "What are you doing here? I'm going to be there Saturday, remember?" I didn't know all of his injuries yet. I didn't know he had multiple brain bleeds and he had multiple vertebrae injuries. I didn't know he couldn't feel his feet properly at that point. I didn't know the medication he was on. His nurse filled me in later. So we sat there that first day and he was in and out of consciousness. And then Isaac, he had gotten us a great hotel. He got me my favorite food. He took care of me that night. And then he got me back to the hospital the next day. And we sat there that day. And I would just sit there in that room and listen to the heart monitor and just, I was like, Lord, I thought he was coming home. It felt like When he left the first time, it felt like he had died. And now he had just died all over again. But he was still alive. And I just hung on to that. And I just sat there and I prayed. The third and fourth day, he was starting to be he was more alert. He was more active. His surgical team was meeting with me and telling me that we needed a plan for when he left. They didn't want him to be alone. They wanted to know what his living situation was. So I told them that he was living, I knew enough at that point to know he was living in an apartment on top of a 3-stall garage on an estate on a lake. And it had a steep set of stairs. And they said, nope, can't send him there. He's not going to be able to move that much to be able to go up those stairs. And he can't be alone. He was on some pretty heavy medication. And I don't know if the medication masked his self-will at that point, but he was open to coming home with me. And so I thought, okay, Lord, if that's what you want, if you want him to come home, it's not going to be easy, but I will bring him home with me. So when I came back then that next day, I was ready for that. But by then they had stepped back his medication and his stubborn will had come back. And he said, nope, I'm going back to my place. That was the day that his dad decided to go to the sheriff's office and get the report and also get Andrew's personal things that they had recovered from the completely trashed motorcycle. So 2 things happened. His dad called me and read me the report. I have promised Andrew I will never, ever tell him what happened to him. So I can't give you all the details, but I can tell you his body was thrown 150 feet across a field. He never let go of the motorcycle, so the impact of the motorcycle kept slamming him into the ground. There was no reason, no earthly reason that he was still with us. His helmet was split in half. The bag that he would keep on the back of his motorcycle, which is made out of some material that's not supposed to break, looked like somebody had taken a knife to it and just hacked it to bits. It was full of rocks and dirt and grass. Everything inside of it was mangled. And all I could think of was, that's his body. What that bag went through, he went through. It was heartbreaking, but he wasn't dead. God didn't let him die. The other thing that happened was that Andrew decided he wanted to go home. He bullied the staff until they let him. I don't believe his body was ready to go home. He still needed some time to heal, but he had decided that he wanted to go home, and he decided I was going to take him. And this was weird that he wanted me to take him. And I didn't want to go because I never wanted to see his apartment. I never wanted to know where he had taken his life and run away from us to. But I prayed and I thought, okay, God, if you're asking me to do this, if you don't give me another way out, I will go. I'll go. So at the end of a very long, very exhausting day, I drove him back to his apartment. He was in pain. He could hardly move. I got him up the stairs. We opened the door, and it was like a sensory overload. I saw this beautifully furnished bachelor pad. It was something about the combination of what I could see and what I could smell and just everything all at once and my exhaustion and the emotions, I had a panic attack. And Andrew took one look at me and he knew I was ready to run. I mean, I did not know how I was going to stay in there 1 minute, let alone I was going to have to sleep there because it was too late to come home. So he started lashing out at me verbally. Every nasty thing that had ever come out of his mouth came out again. And I started yelling back. And I don't know what it was that made me stop. But all of a sudden, I just stopped. I'm so thankful Andrew can't remember that fight. That was a long night. I slept about an hour. The next day, I made him his favorite food. I wanted to fill his fridge. So I did. I cooked for him. I cleaned up his place. And then I had to leave this broken, battered man in his apartment by himself. He couldn't drive a car. He couldn't move. He was in a brace from his neck down. He could not turn his head. He couldn't twist his body. He couldn't get in and out of a bed. But he was determined to stay there. What I did not know is that he had a girlfriend. So I drove back home, started working again, back to my life, tried to act like everything was normal. Every day he would call me when I was at work in a panic. And I would have to talk him down. It was the strangest thing. I had a assistant working in my room at that time who's now a teacher there. And thank goodness she wouldn't ask any questions. I would just say, "Can you take the class? I have to leave the room. I have to take this call." And he would just start crying and panicking. And I would sit there and I would listen to him and I would pray with him until he was calm. And then I'd go back to work. I wasn't doing very well at this point. I was pretty destroyed by what had happened. Christmas came around and it was just going to be my youngest son and me. And that was probably the hardest Christmas I've ever had. And I remember I'm hanging on by a thread and I just need something to give me some hope. And we had decided we'll go to church. We came here. And then afterwards, I was going to get pizza at Sammy's because I wasn't going to cook Christmas dinner for just the two of us. And I went to pick the pizza up to take it home. And Brenda was working at the counter and she was going to tell me the total. And Mike says, "No, come here, come here." So she went over to him and he whispered something. And then she came back and she said, "Here, Merry Christmas." She hands me the pizzas. And I burst into tears. Poor Mike, he didn't know what he had done wrong. That was a blessing. I needed something. I needed something to give me a little bit of hope and make me smile. Just, they'll never know how much that meant to me. So I started the process of healing again. I got into an online study of Lisa Turker's Forgiving What You Can't Forget with a couple of the ladies from this little group that we had started online. One of them lives in Seattle. The other lives in Arizona. We've become really close friends. It was really interesting because we were learning. There was a section of the book where you're learning to remove the lies from the enemy that you've come into agreement with, things you've taken into your identity that have become a part of you. And you're learning where that originates from. And so part of the process is to forgive the people or the situations that either, spoke that over you or were the reason that you believe those things. So lies that we probably all, there's certain things we've all taken on. I thought that a lot of my brokenness came from the things Andrew had said and spoken over me. It was a really interesting process because I came to understand that a lot of those lies had come many, many years before, and he had just reinforced them with his words. So I went through that process. I started to heal my identity. In 2023, my prayers were changing. I wasn't praying for my marriage so much anymore. It felt like the, the urgency to pray for Andrew to be drawn back to God was far bigger. For a while, I felt called to pray that the friends he had made there that were keeping him stuck in this life that he had chosen, I felt called to pray for them to find Christ, and prayed for them to be removed from his life if they were not going to be good mentors and good friends for him. So for a while, I was praying that, Lord, bless them and remove them from his life. So this was May, beginning of May. We're moving Sam into his first rental house. And on the way back to Cloquet, Andrew starts telling me the strangest story, how his two closest friends have suddenly gotten very hostile, and now they want nothing to do with him anymore. And I'm sitting there in the passenger seat going, oh my gosh. I mean, I didn't know. I thought if I even look at him, he's going to know it's my fault. So that was awkward. Shortly after that, it was actually a week before our school was done for the summer. Andrew walks into my kitchen with divorce papers. Out of the blue, because why change anything at this point? He wants to go public with his girlfriend. He wants to move on with his life. He wants the boys to meet her. He wants to make it permanent. I looked at the papers, and I remember I looked at him and I said, can I have a minute, please? Alone? And he said, sure. And I went in my bedroom and I sat on the bed and I just prayed. I said, Father, I know divorce won't stop you. I know nothing's going to stop you from the promise you gave me. Should I fight this? Should I do anything about it? Or what do you want me to do? And I was just filled with peace. I can't really explain it. I just had this peace come over me and I just knew, nah, I don't have to fight this. What good would that do? Jesus has been loving Andrew through me this whole entire time. What would that say to him if I started fighting him on this divorce? And I just knew, sign the papers. Maybe it's the only divorce in history where somebody has signed the papers without even reading them. I signed them, and Andrew said, well, don't you want to read them first? And I said, I don't need to. God made me a promise. I know you're going to do what you think you need to do right now. But you will be back. God's bringing you home. And when he does, just know that door is still open. I did go through a grieving period after that. I think, we have the spirit we have a spirit inside of us, but we also have a human side, and the human side went through some emotional weeks after that. And it was getting bad. I'm a very private person, but I was crying in the produce aisle at the grocery store. Like, it was ridiculous. So I finally came up for prayer at church, and the lovely prayer team, one of them, as they're praying to me, one of them gets a strong sense that I need to pray a prayer to have the soul ties between Andrew and me broken. So we prayed that prayer. The other woman, she has a vision as that's happening, a beautiful vision that she shares with me. I walk out of this church about 10 pounds lighter that day. I felt like I had been set free. I believe that's when I finally truly surrendered my marriage. It's a process, and I knew it was a process. I've listened to hundreds of testimonies. It's not something you can just do. It takes a lot of work. I think our human will is so stubborn, it just can't let go. That was a wonderful summer. I lost 15 pounds without even trying. And I asked a woman who had been kind of mentoring me and helping me through some of this stuff. I said, "Can you lose weight when you surrender something and forgive somebody?" And she said, "Absolutely, you can lose weight." It was great because I didn't have much money and I had virtually nothing to wear that wasn't old. But I had that corner of my closet that had the clothes in it that I'd never worn because they didn't quite fit, but they were too cute to get rid of. So I prayed to God. I said, "Okay, I know I can't go shopping. What do I do?" So I lost 15 pounds and everything in that corner of my closet fit that summer. I had a whole new wardrobe. My son Isaac took me on a trip to California, to the coast. That was a blessing. That was a surprise. I thought I would never go on another vacation. I just felt like nothing exciting was ever going to happen again. I spent my days in my flower beds with my boys and my spent time with friends, started volunteering, and then I signed up for a mentoring program with an online ministry called Kingdom Blueprint. And I was learning to walk in faith in all areas of my life. And then Andrew started calling me and showing up, and we became really good friends. I remember telling my mom, I said, obviously my parents did not like him at this point. And I told her, I said, "We've gotten to be really good friends." And she said, and she's 80, she said, "Don't you think you've been friend zoned? How is how's God gonna bring him home if you've been friend zoned?" I said, "Well, don't you think it's gonna be easier to convince him to come home if he likes me?" Oh, where are you? We're gonna wrap things up here. Fall of 2023. I'm still in the Kingdom Blueprint program on Monday and Wednesday nights. It was on Zoom. There were like 16 of us and then the facilitators. I have two dreams a week apart. One of these dreams, I'm in a room and I see a picture across the room, a portrait, and it's me. And I'm wearing this kind of plum colored dress and I look really pretty. So I, of course, walk across the room to look at myself. And as I cross the room, I realize, yes, I have got this beautiful dress on, but I look exhausted. You could see the exhaustion in my face and in my eyes. And then I feel two hands on my shoulder. I turn around and it's Andrew. And all of that shame and fear and anger is gone from his eyes. It's just the man that I knew years ago. And he says, "I'm just so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't love you well." And I woke up from that dream. A week later, I had another dream. I was in my bed, in my bedroom, and there was a thunderstorm outside with crashing thunder and lightning. And every time there was a crash of thunder, a lightning bolt would hit my bedroom window and try to slice through it. over and over and over again. But it couldn't break the window. And I woke up. And I remember thinking, Satan can try, but he cannot get in. So I was in my mentoring group one Wednesday, and the subject of dreams came up, and I don't know a lot about dreams. I don't know how to interpret them. And we started talking about it, and I told the group my dreams, and I said, what do I do with these? And Mary, one of the facilitators, she said, write them down, pray over them, and receive them, because they're a promise from God. You don't know when he's going to fulfill that promise, but it's a promise. And so I said, okay, and then what do I do? And he said, or she said, you just get on with your life. Don't sit around and wait for it. Do whatever's in front of you. So I did. I got off that Zoom call. I went and wrote these dreams down, prayed over them, received them. And then I went and started the dishes. I think I'd been doing dishes for about 4 minutes when the phone rang. And it was Andrew. And there was something in his voice that told me right away, this is not dishes conversation. So I sat down. And at first he was kind of just rambling, and it didn't make a lot of sense. And then he took a breath and he said, I'm coming home. God's sending me home. Coming home was a process. But during that time, we dated. He wanted to date. And it was a good idea because we didn't really know each other anymore. And that was fun. We got engaged in February of 2024. And then we had 6 months of pre-marriage counseling. That was really good. And we were remarried right in this spot right here, September 28th, 2024. It's obviously not where the story ends, but it's where this story ends. I can look back this past year and I can see God's hand continuing to work. He is healing my land. My mom used to say when I was a little girl, when God does something, he does it royally. He does it so beautifully. He doesn't just fix something. He makes it a masterpiece. There's not a day that I don't wake up with a smile on my face and just can't believe that this is my life now. If I had known it would take all those years ago, I wouldn't have gone through it and I wouldn't be here now. He really is the God of the impossible.